Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Your Spiritual Journey. This is Dr. Bob, and we are here to talk about things that are of interest to your soul. I just wanted to mention that we would appreciate it if you would like us, if you would subscribe to us on YouTube, and maybe even support us through Patreon. We're interested in staying on the air as long as possible. My guest today is Anjali Soi, and Anjali is an evolutionary astrologer and a certified mediator at Sun Conflict Solutions. Now, I'm going to say some words that may not mean a whole lot to you right now, but she's going to explain them. So, having a Pluto stellium natally in her Libran 8th house, she has been drawn to understanding the astrological dynamics that bring harmony to relationship conflicts and difficult life situations. She learned evolutionary astrology through extensive self-study since first studying with Boulder-based Melody Scott Zindell in 2006, and she learned directly from the founder of this paradigm, Jeffrey Wolf Green. So that's quite a mouthful, but we'll have her explain some of those things. Anjali has published an astrology coloring book called Poetic Meditations for the Astrological Journey. It's an adult coloring book. And 2 poetry books called Poetic Meditations for the Evolutionary Journey and Velvet Evenings, a poetry collection available on Amazon. She is an Indian classical and folk dance artist in the Pittsburgh area and has been doing that for almost 2 decades. She has also developed creative conflict resolution curriculum for youth online, and that online connection at conflictresolution.thinkific.com will be on my website. So there will be a link from the yourspiritualjourneypodcast.com website. And you can also find more about her on her website, and we'll also have a link to that from our website. So at this point, I'm going to turn the mic over to Anjali and ask her to relate her spiritual journey from childhood till the present day. The mic's all yours.
Sure. I come from a Hindu family. I was born and brought up here in America. Was born near Philadelphia. Moved to Pittsburgh when I was 7. And I come from, you can say, my mother is very religious, in very big believer of Hindu rituals and Hindu philosophy, belief. So ever since moving to Pittsburgh as a young girl, we got connected with the local temple here, the Hindu Jain temple in Monroeville, PA.
Now, before you continue, then, were your parents immigrants?
Yes.
Okay.
They were immigrants.
From where?
My parents are both from Chandigarh, Punjab. Chandigarh is the capital of the state of Punjab in North India.
Okay.
And my dad came over in the 70s. He did his master's at Columbia University, then married my mom, brought my mom over, and then I came out soon. Then I have a younger sister. So yeah, we're an immigrant family. I have been to India many times. I have been to Punjab many times. I have also worked there just for a summer as a legal intern. I love it there. I wasn't really an ABCD, what they call American-born confused desi.
Oh, ABCD, that's a new one to me.
Yeah, yeah. So, not too much. I love all cultures, I love my Indian culture, and I love my Western culture. I'm 50-50.
Okay.
So there are, really awesome aspects to both cultures. it is a struggle sometimes to communicate that, and also like how do I integrate that to the next level in my life, personally, professionally, communally. But I've always been very naturally interested in spirituality too. When we got connected with the temple, I started taking Bharatanatyam, which is an Indian classical dance form, at the temple there. So I did that for 10 years. I've also learned from artists in India and Virginia. And there is so much mythology telling. There's a lot of expressing and, telling of narratives of Hindu mythology in Bharatanatyam. So we tell the stories of, Lord Shiva and Durga, and that is a dance form which is so spiritually based. I went on to also learn flamenco, which is a Spanish classical dance form. And I have a love for classical dance, but, it's different in the way it's not so spiritually based. Like flamenco is not so spiritually based. So I did that, and I was going, I right after my undergraduate studies, I went into law school and experienced some health issues and relationship issues. So as I say, like, I am an endometriosis survivor. I had my first surgery in law school. And I was going through a very tough time, was very depressed, but was committed to finishing school. I was looking for something to read to give me some inspiration, some self-help during that time. And I went to Half Price Bookstore out in North Hills. Is that North? No, South Hills.
Okay.
Something told me to drive in that direction and turn here. I saw the Half Price Bookstore. Had never been in there before. And I came across this book called Pluto, Journey of the Evolutionary Soul. And I started looking through it, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. This is astrology. And I had dabbled in astrology since being a teenager. And astrology is a big part also of Indian culture. There are many families who consult astrologers for, all topics. And it's not something it's kind of like a routine thing, even for marriages. People will consult astrologers to see if this is going to be a solid marriage. So I had dabbled into actually more Western astrology, and I was, I guess, drawn to that book, and I started reading it, and I found an astrologer on the back of the book. There was a list of astrologers there who practice evolutionary astrology. And I contacted one of them, and she became Melody Zindell. She became like my teacher in the beginning. And she has learned from some of the popular astrologers in this paradigm.
Yeah.
So what evolutionary astrology is, it actually integrates Hindu philosophy.
Oh.
The belief is that the soul, we as souls have desires that we want to manifest in our life, right? All kinds of desires. I want to get married. I want to, pursue this degree. I want to start this business, or I want to kill this person. There's all sorts of desires that we have. And as souls, what we do is we take this human journey to exhaust those desires. So it's actually important to follow your desires, your dreams, because that's part of your cleansing journey, the cleansing of your soul, and also your learning journey, what you are learning about yourself spiritually. Once you do that, your ego, you're also cleansing your ego in a way. You are making also a healthier ego that way. And so the point really is to exhaust your desires lifetime after lifetime until you have no more. You come to a point where you're like, I'm done. I think, you come to a point of desirelessness, and then you merge with consciousness or God or whatever you call it. It's the final surrender. So evolutionary astrology looks at the dynamics and what your karma is, what your desires are, that you are not yet really conscious of in this lifetime. So the process also involves becoming conscious of your desires. There might be points in your life where you're like, oh, like I have this feeling that, I may want to do something or I want to follow this field, but you're unclear about it. But we kind of can look at it as a sign as there's something from your unconscious coming forward. So we help you understand the dynamics in your natal chart. And what a natal chart is we look at the positions of the planets when you were born. And so we create a chart. We focus a lot on Pluto. Pluto is a spiritual planet. A lot of systems in India, in Indian astrology, don't look at what we call the outer planets, which are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They focus on the first 6 planets, which are more personal planets. With evolutionary astrology, we do take on a more spiritual perspective and look at the spiritual journey of the soul. Also, what are the patterns, the psychological patterns of the soul, the behavioral patterns, emotional attachments and needs, and sort of where are you going with that in this lifetime? How are you activating that in certain areas of your life? Maybe like you're taking your creativity to the next level. But that can be anywhere from creating kids and how you relate to kids, or, maybe in your art, your work in your artistry, how you're evolving that to the next level. And what are your archetypes?
So when the scientific community decided that Pluto was no longer a planet, did that disrupt any of this?
No, that doesn't do anything.
Okay.
I mean, it's what we have. We see these entities, right, in our cosmos, and from our human perspective, we have categorized them in a way that we can understand, right? So whether Pluto is a planet, from the scientific perspective, yeah, that would be important. But from an astrological perspective, no, because we attune to a certain energy, which is Pluto represents a certain life-death energy to us. And that's the whole thing. Pluto is, in Hindu mythology, very much like Lord Shiva and Kali. There is the death rebirth force in our universe. And that is what is being, what we are attuning to. So yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay. There's, I guess, my only experience with astrological charts is when I initially joined the ARE, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which is the Edgar Cayce group down in Virginia Beach. They offered a free astrological chart to anyone who joined. And I got an astrological chart, but I didn't do anything with it. I mean, I didn't really understand it, and I guess I didn't have the passion or the interest enough to look at it further. So when you do an astrological chart, a natal astrological chart, and I imagine all astrological charts are natal. I mean, they base it on your birth date and time,
Yes,
as well as the date, but the time of your birth. What meaning should I derive from that? I mean, what
like what is the chart?
If you gave me my astrological chart,
Yeah.
then what? What would you tell me?
Right. So I think I remember Jeffrey Green writing like when the soul is born, it attracts the electromagnetic field of its local universe. So the chart is basically like your soul blueprint or imprint of the energetic forces at that time. We are looking at where the planets are from our human eye perspective, right? So in the sky, we have these constellations, right? We've called all that correlate to Taurus or Aries or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, we've divided, since our Earth is 360 degrees, we've divided each sign relatively to 30 degrees and so forth. So when we say, oh, you're an Aries, they say, so that means your sun is an Aries. So when you were born, the planet or the sun was transiting the Aries constellation.
Tell you what, I'm on Taurus, so we can
Okay,
work with
Taurus. Yeah, so Taurus. My moon is in Taurus. So from our human eye perspective, the sun was in the Taurus constellation at the time of your birth. When we look at the sky, when I was born, it was in Libra, and then we look at the position of the moon and so forth. So there are different what we call house systems. So first of all, you have the 9 planets. Then you have also what are called nodes of the moon. And those represent where the sun's orbit intersect with the moon's orbit. So there's the south node and the north node. And spiritually, the south node is kind of like your karmic past and what patterns are already familiar to you. And the north node represents where you're going in the future direction. So these points in space tell us very much, too, about your evolutionary journey. And that's how we start. We start with Pluto and the nodes of the moon. So if your north node is in Gemini, let's say, you're not very familiar with that Gemini feeling. It also depends also with what other planets might be there. But let's say you have only a north node in Gemini and no other planets there. Then Gemini, that energy of Gemini will be a far reach to really learn about yourself. Like you'll really have to integrate the Gemini energy throughout your life, and it's going to feel difficult. But the nodes are always 180 degrees apart. So your south node would be in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius more or less is going to feel a little bit more comfortable. But there's an evolutionary pull for you to get away from Sagittarius energy, which is right brain energy. It's higher perspectives, beliefs, belief systems, spirituality, intuition, getting into Gemini, which is more exploratory, Mercury left-brained.
Okay, let me extrapolate this to a concrete example.
Okay.
All right, say that this Gemini is in my north node, which means that I'm going to have difficulty, reaching out or communicating maybe with the Gemini. And say my daughter is a Gemini.
Uh-huh.
Now, does that translate to me having communication issues with my daughter?
Yeah, that's a great example.
Okay.
And then that's very karmic too. It's interesting. I have a north node in Cancer, and that's my only Cancer, pronounced Cancer energy, you can say. I have a ton of Libra, and my mom is a Cancer, and I see her as someone who I have a karmic relationship because she's helping me integrate Cancer energy by just being in relationship with her. And she has a lot of Cancer. So I think that this would be a very positive way sometimes to shift how we see each other and why somebody is in our lives. And
Now, moving back to
Yes.
the fact that in India, it's and as Hindu, your family's used to consulting astrologers.
yes,
Then it makes me think that they're pretty happy that you went into astrology.
I think they find it inspiring. Yeah. It's helped me a lot emotionally. Because it helps me answer the why. Like, why is this happening in my life, or why am I like this? And it gives me more self-acceptance because we have this paradigm here, this model, this method that gives you validation. And astrology also is very intuitive. So, you know, you already know about yourself, right? It's like, oh, I'm a Libra, okay, but you kind of that's the sense of what I always come back to feel good about myself. Libras love relationships. They're always looking for harmony and balance, and they love the arts. And I've been like that since I was a child. I'm a very relationship oriented. I need a lot of friends. I need like intimate relationships, and my whole life I've loved dance. So when I learned, oh, this is Libra energy, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, like that really, like, I feel attuned and it resonates with me. But one thing I wanted to just go back to was the charts, and the mentioning of the houses. What is that? So houses represent areas of life. And traditionally, we have 12 houses. And for example, the second house represents income and finances. Okay. So if you have, let's say, planets in there, that would definitely be a focal point for us to look at. If sixth house represents health, second house or 10th house represents career, and so forth. So depending on where the planets are positioned in which houses, that gives us further information on what's being emphasized in your life. And these houses also have the signs. So, you might have Pluto in the second house in Virgo. Okay, so that would help me understand a little bit about your approach to finances. And since you have Pluto there, which is a death rebirth energy, there's going to be a lot of changes regarding your finances, regarding your income, your security, even your personal needs. And you may go through some crises, throughout your life. So when we're talking about Pluto, we're talking about a really intense atomic energy here. It represents change, right? Because evolution means you're changing, right? Something is dying, something is rebirthing constantly. So, it can be anything from atomic wars to wars in your own family, or intense cataclysmic changes, as they traditionally say. It doesn't necessarily have to, in the sense that if we have some knowledge about this area, we can make certain mental adjustments and how we might be able to deal with what's coming up. But you have Pluto also represents intimacy. It naturally rules what is the 8th house, which is the house of shared resources. When you merge with others and you create attachments and needs, and that often also represents finances. So 8th house represents divorce also. And then you go deeper in some of the darker topics too. It can represent betrayal, violence of all kinds. So if there's abuse going on, say domestic abuse, I can often see that there's planetary emphasis in the 7th and 8th houses. and even the second house. So when you create relationships on a Libra basis, right? You have that sense of friendship or family or whatever it is. And then you go next to the deeper level where there's a certain nature to the bond that you might have. But yeah, it is traditionally a marriage house from the evolutionary perspective.
So when we look at the different signs of the zodiac, and you say, okay, well, you're a Taurus,
Mm-hmm.
and you married a Leo, and that never works.
Yeah, a lot of
Or-
friction there. And why do you say that? Do you have personal experience with that?
Well, I am married to a Leo.
Oh, wow.
But
Okay.
we get along great.
Yeah.
So is it more about these houses
Mm-hmm.
than about the sign itself? Because it's a pretty broad generalization to say this zodiac sign doesn't get along with this zodiac sign, because they can get along if these things also are in alignment. Or
Exactly. You're
how does that
exactly
work?
right. I think that popular astrology has placed so much emphasis on the sun sign.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone just kind of, I feel like, reads about that. And I mean, how much can you read about yourself and your sun sign? You know, you have to go into your moon sign.
Well, they were always good bar pickup lines.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that how it worked for
No,
you?
no,
Okay.
no, that's not me. I'm not a
Yeah.
bar person.
Yeah.
But
But you make a great example, like Taurus and Leo, right? We also look at the degree aspects between the signs. So Taurus and Leo are 90 degrees away from each other. We call that a square. Square aspects are aspects of tension. So if your sun signs, what does sun represent? The sun sign is just like what you come back to feel like yourself. What you just makes you feel alive, where you have well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So a Taurus sun sign, Taurus represents so many things like like food, you know, and cooking and gardening and material arts and fashion, money, business. It's a solid sign. It's an earth sign. It's a sign of the bull. They're very solid, dependable, you know, sometimes stubborn people, right? But that's going to be your nature. Whereas a Leo loves expressing themselves. Mm-hmm. It's a sign also of the child. That person loves expressing what their inner child is. And Leo loves being creative. It's a sign of creativity. It's a sign of romance, of children. That's what they come back to feel like themselves. Okay, but Taurus and Leo, they have tense aspects. So there's going to have to be a lot of compromise to get along. Let's say your moon signs are, I don't know, moon is in Taurus and the wife's moon is in Virgo, okay? They're 120 degrees apart from each other. That's called a trine, and those are easy aspects. So your moons would get along. Moon represents your emotional body, your emotional needs. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have Taurian needs. She's going to have Virgo needs, right? But they're both earth signs. Virgo is mutable. It's a little bit more adjusting, whereas Taurus is fixed. It's a little less adjusting, but overall they work together well. So you're absolutely right. You can't really base who you're going to date or marry or get into partnership with in business based on sun signs. You have to look at the whole chart. You have to look at the individuals, also how they think and communicate, right? Which is Mercury. A Mercury in Libra person is going to be more like thinking about how can we achieve balance, you know? How can we take the extremes and come to a compromise here? Whereas a Mercury in Cancer person is going to be far more emotional in their thinking. And none of it is wrong, right? It's all just the soul's perspective.
Yeah.
So that to me is really fascinating because each individual is so unique. And then when you combine them in relationship, then where are the midpoints that we can meet?
Yeah.
And there are charts, you'll see relationship charts where you're like struggling to see where there are some easier aspects or more benevolent aspects, and they don't work, But sometimes you need to have a relationship for a certain experience, right? So maybe it played out in a certain way, but in terms of more of the long-lasting relationships, you do want to see, like, specifically the placement of Venus. What is the approach of the person to relationships, which we tell in the seventh house? If they have, again, Cancer on the seventh house, that person's going to be far more emotional, whereas someone with a Virgo is going to be a little bit more, detached or analytical about things.
Yeah.
And then, if someone's having a relationship issue, that's how you can start. You can start making those, tune into those energies and validate and acknowledge both persons for how they think, what their emotional needs are, how they feel good about themselves, right? And then see how you can merge that in the middle. And it's always a discussion, right? It's going to be kind of a long discussion. So I think, to me, as a Libra person, finding harmony and balance between all this stuff, to me, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I was to, say, find you at a psychic fair
Yes.
and sat down in front of you and say, okay, do whatever it is you do and let me know what the results are. What is it that you would do? Because typically that would be like in 15 minutes or 20 minutes time.
Yeah.
So how would that work?
You wouldn't have a lot of time. It's a psychic fair.
Right.
So I play it up. Sometimes I just have people ask me a question. There might be like a focus point. I'm having trouble with, my boyfriend, let's say. So then I'll be looking at any transits affecting the relationship houses, and also looking at their Pluto in relationship to it. I always look at Pluto and the nodes first, regardless of any question, because that's how you start in evolutionary astrology. Then you can look at everything else, like Uranus, Neptune, the personal planets, and so forth. But that first gives me the direction to see, like, what is the general life direction of this person? Because that also affects the question they're asking. That, like, the North Node tells us what are the lessons and energy we need to be integrating. And so if there's an issue with the boyfriend, how does that relate to the North Node? And is that person serving, the energy, the evolutionary dynamic of it? And usually they are. I mean, we have to come to some conflict sometimes. Pluto represents conflicts too. So what are the issues that are coming up, and how is it going to serve? How are we going to resolve it in a way that serves the person asking, right? I don't know what the other person is, their energy or anything like that. But what's only relevant is to the person that's asking me, because we have to fulfill what they're doing. Yeah. So that's usually what I do. I have done things where I will just focus on Pluto, the position of the Pluto, and talk about their life story. Sometimes they just want to hear that, what their archetypes are, and what kind of patterns they're developing psychologically in this life. So we'll do that. So I obviously do more intense work in a private consultation.
Right, sure. Okay, I'm going to circle us back to your personal journey.
Sure.
So when last we left you, you were in law school.
Yeah.
So have you finished your law degree?
Yes, I finished that. That in my law degree in another lifetime, you can say. I I went on to start my own business, but I started as a certified mediator. I am certified in elder care issues, business employment, and family and divorce. But I also always had a passion for teaching youth. I would always tutor on the side growing up, and so I went back to school and got my master's in higher education, and using my creative instincts, and I partnered up with some local artists, and we created creative activities to teach conflict resolution to youth. So I have a curriculum for preteens and a curriculum for teens. So it's a creative conflict resolution curriculum. And with the astrology, it's funny. Like, I'm not married. I don't have kids. So it's kind of like I need to keep myself busy, right? Like,
Okay.
my creative work, sometimes I see my astrology stuff as my kids, you know. I wrote a book, and it's like I gave birth to this book, you know.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me busy. And so I first wrote meditations. I wrote meditations for each sign. I was writing them for my acupuncturist who wanted to learn astrology. So I taught him each sign through meditations that I wrote. So it helps you kind of tune into the energy.
Yeah.
Then I had some poetry that I had written from the past, and I took all my poetry and the meditations, and I have a short book that you can read the poetry and meditations to learn the sign. So they're meditative, but they are a little like advanced in the sense that they're like a deeper poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a passion for writing, so that's what I did. Then I collaborated with a local artist here, Rigel Meza Richardson, who's a Carnegie Mellon arts grad. And she and I collaborated to create images that you can color. And they reflect the poetic narratives that I wrote, and also the traditional symbolism of the signs. So then I created a poetic meditations for the astrological journey adult coloring book. So the idea is to read the poetry and then you can color. So I see it as a learning aid, and also something you can just sit with and relax with. Mm-hmm. And kind of like a stress-free activity. It's a 6x9 book. It's a smaller book, so you can toss it in your luggage and it won't take up too much room. Yeah. If you're traveling or whatever. So this is it does represent the evolutionary astrology journey. That's what I tried to do. So the theme of change, I felt, is present throughout my poetry. And I do have another poetry book, which is not astrology related. It's called Velvet Evenings, a poetry collection. It's just poetry about feminine emotion, highs and lows, and finding inspiration after all of it. And they're all available on Amazon.
Okay. So what is this book that we have on display here?
This is the coloring book, the adult coloring book, Poetic Meditations for the Astrological Journey.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. And yeah, it's an adult coloring book. It doesn't mean that teens can also get into it. But it's artwork that Rigel herself has created. And yeah, it's supposed to be a fun activity, whether you're a beginner or you're an advanced learner. It's something that's supposed to just help you integrate.
Yeah. So what application have you had? What clients have you had, or what have you done with this conflict resolution experience?
Right now, I've had a couple child psychiatrists and some families look at it. So I have their testimonials on my website, and there's a couple nonprofit organizations who are interested in working with me on jump-starting this. And I've spoken to a couple school districts also. So it's kind of like tentative right now.
Yeah.
And it's all online. The curriculum is all online. It's self-paced. So students can just work at their own pace on it. There's audio in there. There's PDFs. My instruction is all in there. And so, yeah, I integrated actually the 5 agreements written by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Of course.
Yeah. So I think they're very powerful. He himself says that these agreements can greatly help reduce suffering in relationships. So I integrated them and created activities to teach each agreement on how not to make assumptions, how to be impeccable with your word. And that's at my preteen level.
Usually they're referred to as the 4 agreements, but he came out with the 5th
agreement. Be skeptical, but learn to listen. And so that one is a big one, listening. In conflict resolution, you are incorporating active listening or reflective listening. And so I incorporated a lot of activities and skills in that to teach listening.
Yeah.
How do we learn to listen? Because I think that's a big problem right now. In the intensity of the moment, we're not listening to each other. So I have the students also write their own stories. I worked with a couple storytellers in Pittsburgh, and so they tell stories, you watch their videos, you answer questions that incorporate the 5 agreements, like where could they have practiced this agreement or so forth, to make the story move in a positive direction. I have them write their own stories, and then they work with a partner, in sharing their stories that they wrote. And then they have to ask questions about it. Like, this is what I heard you say. Yeah. This is what I heard the character go through or whatever. I resonated with this. And that's how we also start making connections and a ground that the relationship can now move forward.
Right.
To walk on.
Okay, now I'm all over the place here.
Me too.
I'm going to swing back to the astrology. Okay, that sentence that I read earlier, having a Pluto stellium natally in her Libran 8th house. Now, we get the idea that you're a Libra.
Yeah.
And you talked about the houses, and you talked about Pluto. A Pluto stellium, what is that?
A stellium is when you have 3 or more planets close together. Now, there's different beliefs. And what I do is if the planets are within 7 degrees of each other. So let's say you have a Mars at 2 degrees Taurus, a Sun at 4 degrees Taurus, and a Mercury at 6 degrees Taurus. They're all within 7 degrees of each other. So that's called a stellium. And that becomes an important trait of the chart because that energy is intensified. The Taurus energy is intensified. The planets also become sort of merged in a way, and they play off of each other a lot. And the house that they're in, that area of life, also becomes more pronounced. Some people think stelliums are when you have 3 or more planets in the same sign, regardless of how many degrees apart they are. I've even heard if they're just in the same house, it's a stellium. I'm kind of a traditionalist, and it has to be within 7 to 8 degrees for it to be a stellium. So I have how many? I have a 4-planet stellium in the 8th house, which is why I think I was drawn to evolutionary astrology, since 8th house is the house of evolution. So I have a Mercury at, 28 degrees Libra, Pluto at 26, Sun at 22, and Jupiter at 21. And then I have a Saturn in Libra Saturn at 14 Libra. Now, it's interesting because, according to Western astrology, that's pretty much, that's definitely a stellium. You wouldn't be looking at Pluto in Indian astrology. So you would just be looking at Mercury, Sun, and my Jupiter. That's still a stellium.
Yeah.
But as you see from that perspective, then you're not really getting that other layer.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is really cool about Jeffrey Wolf Green, who you can say is a founder or really popularized this dynamic. He went through a lot in his life. He went through a lot of trauma. He went to the East, and he had been in monasteries and so forth, and he feels that he was shown the paradigm in a dream. So I think maybe that's why I like this, because it combines both Western and the Eastern religious philosophy. Yeah. And it gives a voice to the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So Pluto is the path of soul rebirth. Uranus represents where you become individuated. Where are you not being authentic? Where have you become too merged with what is acceptable, the conditioning and all that? Where you are not being you yourself, the authentic you. That's where Uranus comes in and shows you how to do it. And so Uranus is a really, to me, also a very inspirational planet because it represents your inner genius. It's the planet of Einstein because it's like Pluto correlates with Scorpio. Uranus correlates with Aquarius. So it's where you're naturally inventive and where you also network with like-minded people, where you break away from the status quo and create like-minded groups and associations and start new things. So that's that. There's always a dark side to each planet, right? So Uranus also represents where you get traumatized, where you experience sudden shocks and upsets. If you can say that lightning bolt you experience, right? It's leading you to your authentic self.
Yeah.
And that experience can be obviously very traumatic, and that can relate to so many things, right? From, being an LGBTQ person in the world that we are in, the systematized world we're in, that would be very Aquarian journey, Uranus journey. So Neptune represents where the path of our spiritual realization lies. So depending on the house and sign, that would be that energy. So with that comes that, and Neptune correlates with Pisces. That comes with a lot of confusion, right? A lot of despair, disillusionment. So that's Pisces. Neptune represents where we have to face the lies that we have believed in order to come to truth or consciousness.
Yeah.
So Neptune is still kind of like a confusing planet to me. So I kind of stick with Pluto and Uranus. I mean, in your late 30s and early 40s, you experience actually a lot of heavy Neptune transits. You come up with certain squares.
Wait
transits.
A minute. Now, who's the you? Is that everybody?
That's
in
everybody.
General?
That's everybody in general. They
Okay.
There's some, the transits will make certain tough square aspects to your natal Neptune. And at some point, I feel like I've integrated so much over the last few years because I'm in my early 40s, and I feel like, whoa, the Neptune energy, oh my God, it is not something to mess with. It's real. It infects your lymph too. So there's also medical astrology. All the signs correlate to certain systems and parts of your body. I'm trying to actually advance my knowledge of that also. It's fascinating. I can feel the sluggishness. I'm like getting lymphatic massages, but it's like you don't want to get too many. You only want to get a couple because then something comes up. So it's been really fascinating in how issues also around with intestines.
Yeah.
And all that. So
maybe you just need a little Reiki. Is what
I need some Reiki, and I did get that done. So it's been a fascinating journey because I have a North Node in Cancer, which represents containers in your body, including the womb. Mm-hmm. That Cancer energy, the nurturance, it's not necessarily feminine even. I feel like I have a bunch of men in my life who are very Cancerian, So that energy I almost associate with them too, not just my mom. But I feel like I've been karmically surrounded by a lot of Cancer energy because I don't have any. And through health issues, I'm being forced to get in touch with that.
Yeah.
And so I've done so much acupuncture and, craniosacral, all this alternative medicine stuff to learn about the womb. And it's a tough, you learn so much also about where your disconnects are.
Yeah.
And where you need to make the connections. So
I know that we are headed toward the end of our discussion already.
Okay.
And this has just been so fascinating.
I know it was a lot of information, so thanks for being patient and and listening to all of it.
Well, there's a lot to understand, obviously, and we've just touched on just a little bit of it. I do want you to know that we do have a strong listening audience in India.
Oh, wonderful. Where in India?
I can't tell you exactly where, other than we had a Sikh on the program. He lives in Monroeville.
Okay, yeah.
And suddenly everything lit up. I mean, he has gotten almost more response than at any other interview that I've done.
That's wonderful.
So India and Turkey are two big outside countries.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
So I just wanted you to know that, because if you've got relatives in India and people there, you should let them know about this.
I will, definitely. Yeah, I told my family I was coming here today, and they were really excited for me. So...
So at this point in every podcast, I always ask the guest to leave our audience with a few words of wisdom. Now, they don't have to be real wise. You can just leave them with some words or recommendations. But my audience expects this, so I'm going to drop that on you and just say, whatever you'd like to leave the audience with, this is your opportunity.
I don't know how wise this is, but I'll tell you through my own Plutonian journey, which has included traumas, lows, highs, absolutely beautiful moments of surrender. What I have learned about navigating this life is you have to take your time. Don't rush. Because, is it such a big deal for you to delay making that phone call for 2 days? Do you have to call right now? Do you have to answer that phone call right now? Do you have to make a certain decision right now? Take your time. It's not about being lazy. It's not about that. It's about attuning into finding your center, making decisions in a more intuitive way, and in a way that's going to cause less trauma and stress later. I feel like so many of the issues that we are going through as a world is like we're stuck in the old time of Chronos. It's just the same, kind of 9 to 5, rushed. We have to do all these things. And sometimes I question to a client and I say, do you even really have to celebrate this holiday this year? Is it such a big deal if, like, for 1 year you don't celebrate a holiday? People are so stressed out and going crazy. And I have learned that too through my own life, just in addressing my attitudes of impatience, or I really want to do this, or for whatever reason. It is wise to delay things just a little bit and take your time and really make decisions and even do tasks from a centered place. Even if something gets delayed 2 years, is it really the end of the world? Yeah. So I know that's a lot of words, but...
Well, No, there's
That's my words of wisdom.
in different spiritual parlance, that's basically, can you stop reacting and give yourself time to respond thoughtfully rather than just reacting?
Yes, yes.
Because you have a choice, and it's a choice that you can make. No one else makes it for you. You can just decide, no, I'm going to wait.
I think that's what it is. I think that we feel like we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And I can so relate with that. I mean, it's hard. It's really, really hard. But I question, like, how many tough moments do you have to go through to finally realize that, like, you do have some power.
Right.
And that, I love how you say that, to not be in that just reactive mode. Right. Be in a more empowered, self-empowered mode. Yeah.
Because nobody takes your power away from you. You give it up.
Yep.
And you don't have to give it up.
Right.
You can hold on to it.
And that's also the path of Pluto, is finding your power.
Yeah. Yay, Pluto.
Yes, Pluto power.
Okay, audience, you've heard it here. Pluto power to the masses.
Yes.
So until next time, this has been your spiritual journey.